As I said in the beginning, this movie has a number of events and character moments that, taken in isolation, are both interesting and emotionally impactful for many viewers, myself included. However, the question we set out to answer was to what degree these individual plot beats are woven together into a coherent and logical narrative. Now that we've gone through the whole film step by step, I think the best way to summarize this is to create a flow chart of the important plot events. I have organized the events chronologically as opposed to the order in which they are depicted on screen. This flowchart will get a little messy at times as there are occasionally multiple causes that lead to one event, or conversely, a single cause may have multiple consequences, but the plot is mostly linear, so it's not too complicated. Each event has been linked to preceding and subsequent events via arrows, which I have color coded as follows. A blue arrow links a cause to its logical effect. In other words, one thing happened, therefore something else happened. Green arrows connect events that happen in sequence but are not connected by any kind of causal relationship. In other words, something happened and then another thing happened without any particular reason other than luck or coincidence. Red arrows connect events that are illogical or contradictory. These are either causes that cannot have the consequences they are shown to have, or characters acting contrary to their own motivations or abilities. Finally, I have used the color brown to connect events that are either a mix of logical and illogical cause and effect, or they are inadequately explained, such that we don't really know if the chain of events makes sense or not. So, ideally, as we look at the flowchart, we should see lots of blue, very little green, and hopefully no red or brown. So let's dive in. We first have Alma, that is the young abuela, and Pedro meet, they marry, and have their triplets. And then their home is attacked. We never have any idea who these men are or why they attacked the village. I'm generally forgiving of this sort of thing in an introduction, as the writers are just establishing the basis for the story, and the plot thread has to begin somewhere. So it's not a huge problem, but this is an unfounded event. So, because their home is being attacked, Pedro, Alma, and several other villagers flee, which makes sense, and at least three of the horsemen pursue. Because they are being followed, Pedro turns to either delay or stop them in hopes of protecting his family. Therefore, Pedro is killed. Because Pedro is killed, Alma feels a deep sense of loss and grief, which is logical, and also a magical candle is spawned which blasts the horsemen away, causes some mountains to spring out of the ground, creates a living house, and will eventually give superpowers to the triplets and their children. The reason I have colored this brown is that it is never made clear what exactly caused this to happen. Because the magic exists, the triplets get powers when they come of age. We are still introducing the setting, so I can just accept this as part of how the magic works. Because of these gifts, Alma, who I will now be calling Abuela, expects her family to control their gifts and use them for good. This stands perfectly well on its own. Great power comes with great responsibility and all that. However, the writers opted to give Abuela additional motivations. For some reason, she believes that the miracle must be maintained through hard work, dedication, and some other unspecified behaviors that the family must adhere to. I have made this rectangle green because this is a completely unfounded motivation. We have no idea why Abuela believes that there is a connection between the strength and continuance of the miracle and the behavior of the family. And the only thing that might make this make sense, namely the existence of a god who has certain rules of moral behavior, is deliberately avoided in the film. However, this belief leads her to be afraid of losing the miracle if her family acts out of bounds, as it were. At least, the film tells us that she has this fear, even though we never really see her act on it. On top of that, Abuela's unresolved grief makes her doubly afraid of losing the miracle, as it cost the life of her husband. An additional consequence of this fear is that several family members feel oppressed, neglected, or otherwise unfairly treated by Abuela. For example, Mirabel being left out of a family photo because Abuela is thinking about the magic all the time rather than the people around her. This is a logical result of her grief, but it is not a logical result of her expectations regarding her family's use of their gifts. I know I'm getting a bit wordy here, but my point is that whatever hard feelings exist within the family toward Abuela are only reasonable as a result of her being too distracted by thoughts of preserving the miracle to give attention to actual human relationships. Anyone in the family who resents Abuela because of her expectations, even though we never see her express those expectations, is simply an idiot. You have magical powers, you are going to be expected to control them. I'm not aiming that at anyone in particular, but I'm sure Isabella understands. The next major plot event is that little Mirabel does not receive a gift, and the film remains unclear as to why. I think we are meant to infer that whatever entity is controlling the magic did this deliberately as a way of teaching Abuela some sort of lesson by forcing her to try to love a family member who had no connection to the magic. We can't draw this from any clues the script provides, it's just the only explanation I can come up with that even begins to make sense. This is just my own guess, but I don't believe that the writers intended to leave Mirabel's giftless state unexplained. If they had, I would expect at the end of the film to see Mirabel coming to terms with the fact that she doesn't know why she has no gift and she probably never will. It could be a great character building moment, in fact. But since this never happens, it suggests to me that the writers believed they had explained adequately why Mirabel doesn't have a gift. But, well, they didn't. Anyway, as a result of Mirabel not receiving a gift, Abuela is worried that the magic might be failing. Therefore, she asks Bruno to have a vision about the future of the miracle in order to learn how it might be saved. This is because, as we are told repeatedly, Bruno sees the future with infallible certainty. If he sees it in vision, it will happen. So, Abuela asking him for help makes perfect sense. What makes less sense is that as a result of his gift, people don't like Bruno and, as he puts it, assume the worst of whatever he says. People may not take kindly to Bruno giving them bad news, but if he's always right, then they don't have a reason to assume anything. This whole subplot about Bruno being an unpopular outcast is completely unnecessary. Anyway, at his mother's bidding, Bruno sees a vision about the destruction of the magic in which Mirabel features heavily. As a result of this, he is worried that people may blame his niece for something she hasn't yet done, but is apparently fated to do. Even if everyone loves Bruno, they would have every reason to be suspicious of Mirabel as a result of this vision because his predictions are never wrong. Except, for some reason, this vision, out of presumably hundreds if not thousands that he has seen, is unique in that the subject of the vision gets to make a choice. This is quite laughably an admission on the part of the writers that Mirabel is going to be the only character in the story with any agency. It also raises the inevitable question of why this vision is so different from his other visions. From a meta perspective, the reason is that the writers want the audience to feel the tension of uncertainty and just decided that this vision would be different because it's about Mirabel and, well, she's the main character, you see. Within the universe of the story, however, there's no reason for it. Bruno's visions are always right, except for this one, which is different for reasons, but then he could just tell everyone that this vision was different so they wouldn't hate Mirabel for ruining everything in the future. But nobody likes Bruno, so they just won't listen to him, even though he's always right, and he's the only one who knows anything about how seeing the future works, and hey, we'll sing a cool song about how people don't like Bruno, and then nobody will ask these pesky questions. It's really a shame that the writers went this route, not only because it's completely unnecessary for Bruno to be unpopular and for Mirabel's vision to be this one-of-a-kind thing, in order for him to feel protective of his niece and thus be reluctant to tell anybody about what he's seen. But it's doubly unfortunate because there's such an easy fix. You could just have all of Bruno's visions include an element of agency. Have him foresee important decision points in people's lives, but not be able to predict the outcome. This would actually make his gift far more useful since it would give people advance warning of the choices they would need to be prepared to make instead of, hey, your fish is gonna die. Speaking of fish, we got a bigger one that needs frying. Bruno does not want Mirabel to catch any flack on account of his vision, so he doesn't want the contents of his vision to be discovered, and in a stupendously, incomprehensibly boneheaded move, he hides in the walls for 10 years, while simultaneously leaving the broken pieces of the vision behind in his room for anyone to stumble upon. Of course, nobody did stumble upon it until Mirabel came along, which is a problem all on its own, but there is no universe in which this decision from Bruno makes any sense. As a result, I have colored this entire rectangle red because this single plot point is central to the narrative and it is completely and utterly broken. It is so bad that almost every single character in the film is damaged by it. Bruno, of course, is completely gutted, but the rest of the family doesn't fare much better. Nobody knows where Bruno is or why he's gone. He cannot have told anyone about his decision to leave beforehand, because if he had, we would be asking why no one tried to stop him or even follow him or ask questions about where he was going. Abuela, Julieta, Peppa, and Felix all claim that Bruno left of his own volition, but they simply cannot know this. It is absolutely baffling that nobody seems to have even considered the possibility that he might be dead or lost or trapped somewhere. It is likewise absolutely baffling that nobody thought to search his room after he went missing, and it is simply impossible that Dolores didn't know where he was when she admits that she heard him every day for 10 years. And if his motivation for leaving was to keep the contents of his vision a secret, then it would be unbelievably stupid for him to tell anyone that he had the vision at all. meaning that the only way for anyone to know that this vision exists, and thus the only way for Luisa to have overheard a conversation about it, a conversation that Dolores somehow did not overhear, is if Bruno was so apocalyptically brain dead that he divulged the existence of the vision only to then hide in the walls for a decade so that no one would know about the vision. The plot and several characters are irreparably broken. So then we have a time jump. The next major event is Antonio's party, where Mirabel is left out of the family photo. Abuela is presumably so excited about Antonio's ceremony being a success and what that might mean for the strength of the miracle that she isn't thinking about the one member of the family who has no magical gift. The first is that Agustin, Felix, and Abuela don't have gifts either, but they still somehow made it into the photo. The second is that nobody else notices that Mirabel isn't there, and we have no idea how everyone could have forgotten her so completely. As a result of being forgotten, Mirabel flees the party in distress, and as a result of fleeing the party, she is the only one present in the courtyard when the house starts to crack. While there is a logical reason for her to be here, it is convenient for the drama the script wishes to generate that she is the only person here, and that the cracks just so happen to start appearing at this precise moment in this precise place. It is also terribly inconvenient for Mirabel that Tio Bruno was waiting in the walls, spackle in hand, to patch up hundreds of cracks in a matter of seconds, especially since we have no indication that anything like this has ever happened before, and there is thus no reason why Bruno should have been prepared to fix it. It is not impossible for events to have played out this way, but there is also no compelling reason why they would play out this way. And it is strictly impossible that Dolores did not hear the house falling apart. So either her character is broken due to inconsistent abilities, or it's broken because she just decided to keep quiet instead of backing up her cousin for no reason. Take your pick. Mirabel then runs into Antonio's room, screaming about the magic being in danger, instead of literally any other way she could have told her grandmother about it. But the writers wanted Mirabel to seem like the only person taking the crisis seriously, so they made her act in such a way that would make everyone least likely to take her seriously. Mirabel is either acting very stupidly, or she is acting out of jealousy and a desire to be the center of attention. It's not bad to have a protagonist with flaws, but she doesn't grow out of either of these by the end of the film. The tension with her family that results from everyone believing that she just cried wolf could have been completely avoided if she had just acted more sensibly, and the script doesn't acknowledge this whatsoever. Mirabel never realizes what a colossal blunder she just made, which makes me suspect that the writers didn't realize it either, or maybe they just didn't care. Anyway, as a result of Mirabel's hysterics, Abuela secretly believes her granddaughter's story but does not want it to ruin the party, so she plays it off like nothing is wrong. I can accept that she would choose to do this for the sake of not upsetting the guests, but it is a little more strange that she refuses to acknowledge the reality of the situation even to her own family, especially to Mirabel. If we are to believe that she has a deep-seated and highly irrational fear of losing the magic due to her traumatic past, then she should be willing to move heaven and earth to fix the problem, and instead she is burying her head in the sand, suggesting that she actually has a deep-seated and irrational fear of public embarrassment for no reason. It gets worse, though, because if we accept that Luisa actually overheard the grown-ups talking about Bruno's vision, then Abuela's decision to gaslight everyone makes even less sense, since at least 2 second-generation family members and now Luisa already know that there is a problem with the magic. Because Mirabel is upset over the cracks in the house and about not being believed, she has nightmares about what she saw, which is fine. She can't sleep, so she decides to sneak up to the candle in Abuela's window to check on it, which is also fine, although I don't know what she expected to see from up here that she couldn't see from her bedroom door. The real reason she does this is so that she can be within earshot when Abuela conveniently goes to the window at precisely this moment, which is lucky. Abuela decides to speak aloud to her late husband in something like a prayer, which is something that I can believe she would do. Although it does raise the problem of the film wanting to use religious themes and ideas to drive its plot and its characters, while studiously avoiding any references to the center of that religion, in this case, God. Anyway, as a result of dropping Eve's, as well as the enormous chip on her shoulder from being the only one in the family with no magical gift, Mirabel resolves to save the miracle, although she doesn't yet know how. And, in fact, she never figures out how. But in order to find her first lead, she decides to ask Dolores for help. This is pretty sensible on her part, and I would be praising it if not for 2 significant problems. The first is that Dolores is in the running for the most broken character in the film, so anything involving her suffers as a result. Mirabel has already overheard a conversation that Dolores did not, so this is nonsensical from the get-go. The second problem is that this plot thread ends up being completely unnecessary. It turns out that Dolores doesn't actually have any information, except a vague hint that Luisa might know something. But if Dolores hadn't had any clues at all, then Mirabel could just go ask Luisa for help anyway. There's nothing stopping her from doing this. Which means that what is supposed to be the first clue in a trail of breadcrumbs for our heroine to follow is, in fact, a complete waste of time. As we've been over, it is impossible for Dolores to have heard Luisa's eye twitching all night while being unable to hear Abuela speaking audibly at her window. So she is either broken or lying for no reason. Mirabel decides to ask Luisa what she knows. Luisa doesn't want to talk about it for some reason. She's either so focused on these donkeys that she has no brain cells to spare for conversation, or she just doesn't like discussing problems for some reason. Because of this reluctance, Mirabel pesters Luisa until she snaps, whereupon she admits that she felt weak during Antonio's party, she desperately needs a rest, and impossibly that she once overheard a conversation about Bruno's fateful vision. Her clue about Bruno's vision is the only thing she says that actually gives Mirabel the next step of her quest, meaning that the entire narrative from here on out is dependent on a massive plot hole. So Mirabel goes to Bruno's room where she finds the broken pieces of the vision that absolutely shouldn't be there for reasons that have been explained. Her finding the vision here isn't so much a plot hole in and of itself, rather it is resting on a foundation of other plot holes. Mirabel leaves Bruno's room, and then Abuela and Luisa happen to be there so that Luisa can tell Abuela that her gift has been getting weaker after speaking with Mirabel for reasons that are, at best, unclear. I can believe that Luisa would go to her grandmother with this problem, but it's lucky that Mirabel, and thus the audience, were here at exactly the right moment to witness this. Mirabel then decides to ask around for more information about Bruno's vision. Nobody tells her anything useful, I guess because nobody ever really liked Bruno or something. But Agustin just so happens to walk in while Mirabel is standing there staring at the assembled vision. He's supposed to be fetching her for dinner, so he at least has a reason to be here, but it was still unlucky that he stumbled in at precisely this moment. I can believe that Mirabel would confide everything in her father, as it seems he is possibly the only member of the family with any sense. Augustine says they are going to pretend like nothing happened until after the Guzmans leave, since whatever they're going to do about the vision can certainly wait until after dinner. But oh no, Dolores just happened to be within earshot at precisely the wrong time. Although, come to think of it, anywhere in the house should be within earshot for her, so maybe it's just stupid for Mirabel to be speaking secrets out loud at all. Regardless, Dolores flaps her big fat gums about Bruno's vision and Mirabel's appearance in it. Within seconds, Camilo, Felix, Peppa, and Julieta all know about it, and there are many problems with this. First, Augustine and Mirabel make no real effort to stop Dolores from telling everyone. They could whisper to her right here as she is shuffling away and tell her that it is extremely important that nobody else know until after dinner. Maybe she wouldn't listen, but they don't even try. This is not trying. Second, Dolores is an idiot. And thirdly, Camilo, Felix, and Peppa are also pretty dumb, since any one of them could have chosen to put an end to this little game of telephone, but didn't. Felix is especially to blame, since he of all people must have known the effect this news would have on his wife. As a result of this news, everyone freaks out, especially Peppa. These people have already been shown to be essentially children inhabiting adult bodies, so I guess this is in character. At the same time, cracks start appearing for some reason. It's basically a universal rule at this point that anything involving the magic will happen so as to maximize drama rather than as a result of any discernible logic. A bunch of animals steal the pieces of the vision from Augustine's pocket, they put it together and toss it onto the table. Luisa begins bawling because she can't move the piano, because she's losing her gift, even though nobody else is, for reasons. And Dolores begins caterwauling like a complete spastic about how Mirabel's going to ruin everything and they're all doomed, which, honestly, I can't even call this acting out of character anymore. As a result of these converging contrivances, pandemonium ensues at the dinner table. One consequence of this is that Mariano's proposal to Isabella never takes place. A second consequence is that Abuela becomes aware of Bruno's vision and Mirabel's appearance in it. And then, some rats decide to grab pieces of the vision and run by Mirabel, and she just decides to follow them. I guess to get the pieces back or something, but it sure is lucky that the rats decided to do this at exactly this moment, because otherwise Mirabel's quest ends here. She follows the rats and finds Bruno, which results in her asking him to have another vision about the fate of the miracle. So he does, and the only complaint I have about this is that Antonio is dragged into this for absolutely no reason, and the only important result is to damage Antonio's character. His only purpose for getting involved is to give Bruno a wide open space for having the vision, which is a problem that only exists as an excuse for the writers to get Antonio involved, in an attempt to create the illusion that more characters are relevant to the plot besides just Mirabel. As a result of this second vision, Mirabel learns that she needs to give her sister a hug. With this one exception, none of Bruno's visions have ever functioned in any way as guidance. They simply show what is going to happen. Therefore, the second vision should have convinced Mirabel that she was going to hug Isabella at some point, not that she should do so in order to save the miracle. Once again, the only reason for Bruno's visions to suddenly and inexplicably work in a manner completely different from what the script has established to be normal is that Mirabel is the protagonist, so of course it's different for her. She really is the girl who's the key to everything. So she goes to Isabella's room in pursuit of her little squeeze. Isabella is angry that Mariano's proposal was ruined. She blames Mirabel for it, so she is angry and tells her little sister to get lost. Mirabel responds that her sister can still marry Mariano if she wants to. Mirabel has no reason to suspect that her sister does not want to marry Mariano, since Isabella has put in a great deal of effort to convince everyone that she is eager to be engaged. However, Isabella then declares that she never wanted to marry Mariano and that she was doing it for the family. This does not follow. As I said, she's tried very hard to seem as though she does want to marry Mariano, meaning that if she is telling the truth to Mirabel now, then she must have been lying to everyone else for quite some time. The family will not be served in any way by Isabella deceiving her way into a marriage relationship that she is absolutely not committed to, and we have no indication whatsoever that anyone is pressuring her to do this. The only reasons for her to have been so dishonest for so long are either that she just enjoys screwing with people, is a complete moron, is irrationally terrified of some unknown thing that will happen if she tells the truth, or that she's just unfathomably selfish and can't be bothered to say no. Actually, all of these may be true. The one explanation that is not supported is, unfortunately, the one that the movie wants us to believe, namely that Isabella has been pressured and guilt-tripped by her grandmother into marrying Mariano by telling her repeatedly that it would be good for the family, and so Isabella went along with it despite her own reluctance to do so. Based on what the movie has shown us, Abuela cannot be blamed for any of this, and the entire situation is 100% Isabella's fault. Moving on, the shock of telling the truth at last causes Isabella to accidentally make a cactus. The fact that this episode with Mirabel could surprise Isabella's psyche enough to make her lose control of her powers suggests that either Isabella has never been this angry or that she has never been this honest. But we've seen her get angry before, so I think we know what that leaves us. As a result of accidentally making this spiky little dude, Isabella has an epiphany and realizes that she can make more than just pretty flowers. It is laughable that she was unaware of this until now, and there is absolutely no evidence that anyone has been holding her back in any way. There is nothing for her to break free from except, I suppose, the oppressive and unreasonable expectation that she not use her godlike powers to terrorize the local populace. Two things follow from this girl empowerment rampage of hers, well, other than the chaos of the rampage itself. The first is that Mirabel and Isabella are now the best of friends and their toxic relationship has now completely healed. This is not possible. Given the way we have seen Isabella treat her little sister and given the resentment that we know Mirabel harbors because of this treatment, I do not believe that this rift can be healed without so much as an apology from Isabella. This is not how human relationships work. You do not get over years of hatred and cruelty simply because the plot says you have to be friends now. I personally have 7 siblings, and the idea that Isabella and Mirabel's relationship is now perfectly healthy after a 4-minute song about doing whatever you want without regard to consequences is less realistic to me than the magic is. The second thing that follows is that Abuela comes running in to find out why Discount Poison Ivy over here has lost her marbles. Because of this, Abuela and Mirabel have their big confrontation and both accuse each other of harming the miracle and the family. One of them is justified in saying this, and the other is not. By now, you have heard me say which is which, but let's recap it anyway. Abuela's reasons for accusing Mirabel are as follows. Mirabel is the only one of her descendants who did not receive a magical gift. Bruno disappeared very shortly after Mirabel's gift ceremony failed. Abuela knows that Bruno had a vision in which the magic and the home were falling apart, and Mirabel was at the center of it. Luisa told Abuela that she began losing her gift after talking with and taking advice from Mirabel. And Mariano's proposal to Isabella was ruined, seemingly by Mirabel. The only one of these that doesn't actually point to Mirabel harming the magic is the chaos of the proposal dinner, since Mirabel and her father were actually the only ones trying to stop that. But from Abuela's point of view, keeping in mind that nobody actually understands how the magic works, she has every reason to suspect that something about Mirabel is causing problems with the Encanto. She cannot know this for sure, of course, but it is the best explanation given the evidence she has. On the other hand, Mirabel's reasons for accusing her grandmother of hurting the miracle are as follows. Isabella claims that she wasn't happy with her pending engagement, and people sometimes feel stressed out by Abuela's expectations. As we've been over, Isabella's unhappiness cannot be laid at Abuela's feet. As for the second point, I will simply ask, what does Abuela expect of anyone that is harsh or unreasonable? The only possible answer is to expect Peppa to keep her weather powers under control, and this is only unreasonable because Peppa's power functions by mood rather than conscious choice. However, given the potentially devastating consequences of Peppa's power, I don't think it is unreasonable to ask Peppa to at least try and keep her mood under control. This is all terribly unfair to Peppa, to be sure, but blame the candle. It's not Abuela's fault that Peppa got cursed instead of blessed. Actually, Mirabel has another reason to accuse her grandmother of harming the family, which is that Abuela is so preoccupied with preserving and perpetuating the miracle that she often overlooks her actual family. Case in point, she forgot Mirabel in the family photo. The only problem is that Mirabel doesn't mention this. This is the one thing that Abuela has actually done wrong, and it doesn't come up again. This is so baffling to me, and I can't even begin to explain it. I don't know what else to say on this. Mirabel ignores the one solid argument she actually has against her grandmother in favor of a bunch of nonsense that is completely not Abuela's fault. In any case, the result of this confrontation is that the house crumbles to pieces and the candle goes out. I can't say whether this is logical or not because we don't know how the magic works or why the cracks appear. It sure is convenient for a writer who wants to reserve the right to make anything happen at any time for no reason, but it does make it difficult to understand what is at stake in any given scene. Because the miracle has seemingly died, Mirabel runs off to have a good cry by the river, and Abuela follows her. They have their heart-to-heart, including the flashback to young Alma and Pedro, and this leads them to return to the ruins of their home and reunite with the rest of the family. As a direct result of Abuela's insistence that the family use their gifts to help others, even though we only ever see two of them actually doing this, the townsfolk gratefully return the favor by building the Madrigals a new home. Once they have a new home, the magic returns for some reason, even though the situation is completely different from that which gave birth to the miracle the first time, and everyone is much happier than before, even though I struggle to see how any of these characters have grown or learned anything. Other than Abuela, who I suppose has learned to be less distracted by big picture things and to give time and attention to her family on an individual level. Although we still don't understand why she learned this. So, looking over this flowchart, we see many instances where the chain of events relies on convenience, contrivance, or outright impossibilities. I'm sorry, but there is no other way to say it. Encanto's narrative is packed full of holes and problems to the point that I think we have to conclude that Encanto is just not very good. In case you still aren't convinced, here is the compiled list of the plot-relevant questions that were raised as we went through. I have crossed out all of the questions that were answered within the film, and to be as generous as I possibly can, I have also crossed out any questions that were partially answered or that had answers that didn't make sense for other reasons. So, any questions still remaining are simply not addressed in any way. So let's go through them and see what effect these unanswered questions have on the audience's ability to understand the plot of the story. Why were the villagers forced to leave? Why did Pedro's death create a magical candle? What is the source of the magic? Why did Antonio's ceremony work while Mirabel's did not? Why did Mirabel climb up to her grandmother's window? Why does Dolores interpret Luisa's eye twitching as evidence that she is worried about the Encanto? How did Dolores not overhear Abuela speaking at her window? And if she did overhear, then why did she lie to Mirabel? How did Luisa overhear a conversation that Dolores did not? Again. Or why did Dolores lie? Again. How does anyone know that Bruno had a vision about the dying magic if no one ever found it? And why has no one ever found this vision if it was just sitting in Bruno's room? Why does putting together a couple of the broken pieces of the vision cause an earthquake? And I forgot to add this one, but why does it not cause an earthquake the second and third time this happens? Why did Mirabel lay the vision out on her dresser if she wanted to keep it a secret? Why do neither Augustine nor Mirabel attempt to stop Dolores from spreading the secret? Why does no one else at the table decide to keep their mouth shut? Why does the magic behave as it does? Why Luisa lost her gift entirely? Why Isabella and Camilo's gift seem to be just fine but behaving erratically? While Peppa, Julieta, Antonio, and Dolores' gifts are seemingly unaffected, as well as why the house is cracking again. Why is this particular vision from Bruno the only one that allows for agency? Why did nobody ever look for Bruno or this vision in his room? Why didn't Casita tell anyone that Bruno was hiding in the walls? And I forgot to add this one to the list, but why is Casita unable to help Mirabel in Bruno's room? Why are Bruno's visions now functioning as guidance? Why did the house collapse and the candle go out now as opposed to any other time in the last 50 years? What is the connection between the relationships within the family and the magic of the Encanto? What entity is behind the Encanto? Why did magic come about as a result of Pedro's death? What was the purpose of giving supernatural gifts to the family? What was the purpose of withholding a gift from Mirabel? If the Encanto was initially created by one man sacrificing his life in order to protect his family, why and how does the Encanto now return as a result of a teenage girl replacing a doorknob in order to prove how special she is? And is it possible for the magic to die a second time? None of these questions are addressed in any way throughout the entirety of the film. And all of this reinforces my conclusion that the plot of Encanto is not very good. Now, let's take a look at the other great pillar of storytelling, the characters. To do this, we can compile the notes that we have made thus far about the traits, motivations, and abilities of the various characters and see what sort of patterns or inconsistencies might pop up. We'll start with the least important characters and work up from there. There's a few of the townsfolk that actually have speaking lines. There's the dead fish lady, this balding priest, and these obnoxious kids, but they're not really characters, as there isn't really a whole lot to say about them. They do what the script needs them to do, and that's about it. This guy with the box of goodies has the fascinating traits of being pudgy, smiley, and socially inept. Mariano's mother also doesn't really have much to her, she's just kind of there. Mariano himself is a bit more interesting. He is a guy in town who wants to marry Isabella. He is polite, gracious, has musical talent. He's hardworking, respects his mother, writes poetry, is romantically fickle, and one note that I added here at the last minute because I forgot to include it earlier was that he wants 5 babies. Because, as you'll recall, Dolores overhears him telling his mother this during breakfast. We really don't get any hint of pride or arrogance from Mariano, which makes me think that his interest in Isabella is not due to some ambition to have a magical trophy wife, and more due to the fact that she's reasonably attractive and he has no idea what a harpy she really is. I only hope that if Mariano ever requests a proposal dinner for Dolores' hand, that Mirabel will be there to break it up and spare him from his own foolishness. Pedro Madrigal is pretty simple. He marries Alma and dies trying to protect her and the triplets from harm. I don't know what exactly he hoped to accomplish here by facing down these 3 men alone and unarmed, but I can accept that he simply felt like he had to do something. And the fact that he makes sure to bid Alma and the children goodbye suggests that he knew this would likely cost him his life. That Alma/Abuela is grief-stricken over his death for nearly half a century says quite a bit about what he meant to her and the sort of man he was. Camilo Madrigal is a shapeshifter. He's amiable, he likes to make people laugh, and he likes arepas, which, let's be real, who doesn't? Camilo serves no purpose other than comic relief. His shape-shifting power makes for some nice lighthearted moments, but that's about it. He is entirely irrelevant to the plot and could be removed without changing the story at all. That said, he doesn't take up much screen time, and he's pretty likable and even funny at times. So overall, he's an unnecessary but functional and mostly inoffensive character. Felix is cheerful and does not consider his wife's condition when he chooses to tell her things. Felix, unfortunately, has some problems. He is shown at times to have great care and empathy toward his wife and her curse, but then at other times, he deliberately discusses things with her that are bound to upset her and exacerbate her problems. There is no reason, for instance, for him to decide that in this scene, Mirabel absolutely needs to know about Bruno right now, and there is no reason for him to tell Peppa about Bruno's vision in the middle of dinner. Like Camilo, I think Felix mostly functions to add a bit of levity to the scenes that he is in. However, Felix has just enough screen time to start making decisions that are inconsistent with his motivations. Subjectively, Felix might actually be my favorite character. He's pretty cheerful and a big bundle of fun, and mostly just seems to be interested in keeping everybody happy and having a good time. Objectively, however, his only relevance to the plot is that he is the father of three of the characters. And if those three other characters turn out to be unnecessary, then Felix is also unnecessary. Next, let's take a look at Dolores. Dolores, we learn, has super hearing. However, she either did not hear the house crumbling to pieces during Antonio's party, or she simply chose not to back up Mirabel's story. Her supernatural hearing switches on and off to suit the convenience of the script, or she may simply be a compulsive liar. She is prophesied to love a man betrothed to another, which is presumably Mariano. She is scared of her uncle Bruno. She is a gossip. She is prone to panic. She really likes Mariano. And she kept Bruno's location a secret for about 10 years or so. Dolores is, to put it mildly, an absolutely broken and confused mess of a character. As I mentioned, there are many instances of her super hearing turning on and off to suit the whims of the writers. For instance, she hears Mariano speaking to his mother from across town, but does not hear the house falling to pieces in the next room. She can not only hear Luisa's eye twitching, but can identify that it is Luisa's eye, but she does not hear Abuela speaking audibly at her window. And she failed to overhear a conversation that Luisa, with her normal ears, was somehow able to overhear. Not only is her magical gift wildly inconsistent, but her personality is such that I cannot believe that a real person could be like this. She claims that she heard Tio Bruno living in the walls every day for 10 years, and yet she said nothing to anyone, while at the same time she cannot keep Mirabel's secret for more than 5 minutes, even when there is a very compelling reason for her to remain silent. She starts screaming like a spaz for no reason, and she gives Mariano a hard time about not giving her any romantic attention while he was actively courting her cousin. There is an additional problem with her new relationship with Mariano that I just realized, which is that she knows that Mariano is eager to be married and have children. In fact, she specifically overhears him saying that he wants 5 babies, and he seems eager to propose to Isabella as soon as possible. However, when Mariano suggests to Dolores that maybe they should get married, Dolores tells him to slow down. This means that Dolores' attraction to Mariano is, at best, superficial and at worst, downright manipulative. She knows what Mariano values in terms of marriage and family. She clearly does not value those things and yet is pursuing a relationship with him anyway. Meaning that while she might find him attractive, she either doesn't realize that their values are incompatible or she simply doesn't care. In a way, I kind of feel sorry for Dolores. I suppose that this is just the sort of madness that would fall upon someone when you have super hearing and share a home with 2 married couples. So, does Dolores at least serve a narrative purpose? Well, she points Mirabel toward Luisa, which, as we discussed, is unnecessary. She overhears the Guzmans talking about the proposal dinner, which is also unnecessary. She spills the beans on Mirabel being in Bruno's vision, and this is also unnecessary, as there are any number of ways this information could have been revealed if the writers were absolutely committed to doing so. And she steps in to get smoochy with Mariano when Isabella dumps him, and there is no reason why this needed to happen either. There's also the somewhat strange issue of Bruno prophesying that Dolores would find the love of her life betrothed to another, but as you'll recall, Mariano was never actually betrothed to anyone, since his proposal to Isabella never actually happened. This is either something that the writers overlooked, or it was intentionally suggesting that Dolores does not consider Mariano to be the love of her life, which, given what she knows about what he wants in a relationship, should have given her pause at the very least. This means that Dolores, on the whole, is a completely unnecessary character. She could be removed entirely and very little of the plot would change. Because she is such a terribly inconsistent and poorly written character, the film would likely be of better quality were she not in it. Now let's look at Antonio. Antonio has just come of age, and as the film opens, is preparing to receive his gift that very night. He is eager and excited, but also somewhat nervous about his ceremony. He loves and trusts Mirabel especially strongly, and also loves animals. And the gift that he receives is that he can communicate with animals. However, because he is a child, he really makes no attempt to control these animals, and strangely is completely unfazed when he sees his Uncle Bruno for the first time in his life. Antonio really just seems like a normal kid who likes doing fun stuff. He's generally soft hearted, he's prone to nervousness, and mostly oblivious to the concerns of the adults around him. And of course, he likes animals and is therefore thrilled that his magical gift is the ability to communicate with them. This gift actually turns out to be irrelevant to the plot, however, as it only comes up when the little ferret things toss Bruno's vision onto the table, which didn't need to happen in this way, and when the animals enable him to loan his bedroom to Bruno for the purposes of having another vision, which didn't need to happen at all, since Bruno's need for a big open space was something that the writers just pulled out of thin air. Antonio does, at least, serve an important function near the beginning of the film. His conversation with Mirabel under the bed tells us a great deal about who she is and how she has matured as a result of her own struggles. We see very clearly that she loves her cousin dearly and that she is willing to put aside her own emotional baggage in order to support him on his special day. This scene establishes a reason for him to reach out to her for help during his ceremony, which in turn allows Mirabel and the audience to relive the excitement and crushing disappointment of her own ceremony. Antonio gives Mirabel a compelling reason to try as hard as she can to be stoic and forget about her own hang-ups, which is then paid off when she is left out of the family photo and years of neglect, envy, and disappointment come crashing through that thin facade. Mirabel is, in short, a more believable and compelling character because of her interactions with Antonio, and for that reason alone, I will say that Antonio serves a necessary function to the script. And subjectively, his conversation with Mirabel is probably my favorite scene in the movie. However, Antonio does have some problems. Given his affection for Mirabel, it's a bit odd that he does not even notice that she is left out of the family photo at his ceremony, although I can excuse this as he is a child and children are not known for being attentive or observant. What is harder to forgive is that he has no reaction whatsoever to seeing his Tio Bruno for what is presumably the first time in his life. He's just grinning like there's nothing strange or unusual happening here. Not only is this a missed opportunity, but as I've said, his presence here is completely unnecessary anyway, so this scene is a blight on his character. Altogether though, I think Antonio is mostly well written and his character is probably the strongest in the movie. Let's move on to Peppa. Peppa's mood controls the weather. She is possibly bipolar in that we very rarely see her anywhere between really happy and really anxious. She was prophesied to have rain on her wedding day, which did happen. She hates being told to calm down, and she is quick to forgive and welcome her brother Bruno back into the family. Peppa, far from being given a gift, has been saddled with a curse, in that the consequences of her emotions are amplified to a tremendous degree without any agency on her part. Peppa merely feeling bad can be catastrophic for those around her. I don't think the writers really thought through the implications of her so-called gift. My suspicion is that they chose to give this power to Peppa so that her mother could repeatedly tell her to keep her emotions under control, which is supposed to come across as Abuela being unreasonably controlling. The audience is supposed to watch these interactions between Peppa and her mother and think, wow, it's so unfair that she expects Peppa to be happy all the time. Why can't she just let her be? The reason this doesn't work is that the nature of Peppa's power requires that she show exceptional emotional self-discipline or risk hurting people. I know that the film tries to portray her little storm clouds as something of a minor nuisance that everyone should just learn to live with, but we've also seen her cause hurricanes, tornadoes, hailstorms, and lightning, and these things are not harmless. Beyond trying to make Abuela look bad, which doesn't work, her power serves no other narrative function. To her credit, Peppa does make consistent efforts to keep her mood in check, but there actually isn't a whole lot else to say about her personality. She is affectionate toward her children, especially Antonio, and she seems to have really missed Bruno while he was gone. That's pretty much it. She doesn't do anything or make any decisions that are of any importance to the plot. I won't call her a bad character since she doesn't really have any inconsistencies, but she is irrelevant to the story, and the nature of her magical power kind of ruins her ability to inform the audience about Abuela's character, which I believe was the principal motivation for the writers creating her in the first place. All of this taken together means that of Felix and Peppa's side of the family, Antonio is the only one who really serves an important purpose and is not utterly broken, which leads me to conclude that it would have been better to remove this branch of the family tree entirely and just have Antonio be Mirabel's little brother instead of her cousin. I'm guessing that the writers thought that it was important to have a relatively large extended family, and so they threw in a bunch of characters and then, with one exception, failed to make them either relevant or consistent. I can't know this, of course, since I am not privy to the writer's thoughts. Up next, Julieta can heal people with food. She's warm, nurturing, tender, loving. She is sensitive to Mirabel's feelings, but doesn't know how to help her. She is willing to stand up to her mother to protect her daughter. She attributes Mirabel's story to emotions and imagination. She believes that Bruno lost his way in the family and is afraid that Mirabel will do the same. She believes that her mother is too hard on Mirabel, and she is quick to forgive and welcome Bruno back. In what has become something of a pattern, Julieta's power to heal with food has no relevance to the plot whatsoever. However, the combination of food and healing does at least synergize well with her warm and nurturing personality. Mirabel obviously needs to have a mother in order to exist, but Julieta doesn't actually do anything else in order to advance the plot. So, does she add anything in terms of developing other characters? Well, we see that Mirabel has at least one person in the family who consistently shows her an abundance of love and warmth. Julieta is likely the main reason why Mirabel feels the attachment and loyalty to her family that she does. She is even willing to stand between Mirabel and Abuela at times, albeit in as non-combative a way as possible. Subjectively, I actually really like Julieta. She's the epitome of all things maternal, and watching her on screen makes me want to drive 700 miles to visit my own mother. However, Julieta's character is not completely free of problems. She does not believe Mirabel's story about the house and the magic being in danger, but if Luisa is to be believed, there is a good chance that Julieta has known for about 10 years that the magic is in danger. I do like that Julieta is willing to stand up to her own mother when she believes Mirabel is being treated unfairly, but the words she chooses to use don't really make a whole lot of sense. For instance, when Abuela asks Mirabel to please stop trying to help with the decorations, Julieta basically says, "Please be kind to my daughter, the ceremony will be hard for her." While it's true that the ceremony will indeed be hard for Mirabel, this has nothing to do with the reason they are having this conversation. Abuela wasn't being unkind to Mirabel, she was trying to protect Antonio and the rest of the family from any harm that Mirabel might accidentally cause. Even Mirabel herself wouldn't want to accidentally damage Antonio's ceremony or hurt the magic. So the conflict here is not that Julieta is kind to Mirabel while Abuela is not. The conflict is that Abuela believes the chance that Mirabel might hurt something is sufficient to ask her to back off, while Julieta and Mirabel do not. What would therefore make more sense would be for Julieta to confront her mother with something like, "Mother, she's just hanging decorations. She's trying to contribute something. What harm could she possibly cause?" Which would then prompt Abuela to respond with something like, "Maybe nothing, but we don't know for sure, and I'm not willing to take that chance." This would speak much more directly to their respective beliefs and motivations and would make their conflict more powerful and believable as a result. It's also completely unclear what exactly she means when she says that Bruno lost his way in the family. This is yet another example of where I think the writers are trying to include something that can happen in religious families while simultaneously avoiding, like the plague, any and all reference to actual religion. In the real world, I would interpret losing your way in the family to be something like failing to live in accordance with the moral expectations established by the family, usually in the form of disobeying or ignoring some kind of religious tenet. Because any mention of such things has been scrubbed from this film, however, I have no idea what Julieta is talking about here. The only actual reason that we're given as to why Bruno disappeared is because he didn't like that people seemed to not like him, which doesn't make much sense, but we'll get to that when we discuss Bruno's character. Still, I think Julieta is overall a mostly serviceable character, even if I think her dialogue has room for improvement. Moving on to Augustine, we learn that he is accident-prone. Like his wife Julieta, he is tender and loving, and sensitive to Mirabel's feelings, but likewise doesn't know how to help her. He can play the piano, he is mostly level-headed and sensible, he is willing to stand up to his mother-in-law, but he does not communicate effectively when defending his choices, and he is quick to forgive and welcome Bruno back. Much like Julieta, Augustine doesn't have much relevance to the plot, aside from the fact that he is necessary in order for Mirabel to exist. When introducing us to her father, Mirabel calls him accident-prone, which doesn't come into play at all, except when the writers want to inject a bit of levity, so they introduce some random bees to make this poor man's face swell up like a blimp. The closest he comes to actually advancing the plot is when he stumbles on Mirabel with the pieces of Bruno's vision, but he doesn't reveal this to anyone, and he also doesn't prevent Dolores from revealing it, meaning that he doesn't actually have any impact at all. Like Julieta, I think that his dialogue with Abuela could be much clearer than it is. For instance, when Abuela confronts him about keeping Bruno's vision a secret and not thinking about the family, Augustine says that he was thinking about his daughter. This is true, but it's not the real reason he kept the secret. He kept the secret to protect Isabella's proposal dinner, meaning that he and Abuela wanted the same thing, and she's being an idiot by being angry about the dinner being ruined while also being angry that Augustine didn't ruin it sooner. He should have said something along those lines, and I don't know why he didn't. He is at least likable, and his impact on the story is minimal, so I think the quality of this character is best described as serviceable. Moving on to Luisa. Luisa has super strength. She is stoic and reliable, has a strong sense of duty and responsibility, is stressed and overworked, and loses her gift before anyone else does. Luisa's characterization is pretty simple, but that unfortunately is not enough to save her from contradictory writing. Her relevance to the plot is threefold. Firstly, she tells Mirabel about Bruno's fateful vision and advises her to look for it in his bedroom, which directly leads to Mirabel finding said vision. As we've been over, this is a problem because it means Luisa heard something that Dolores did not. At least some of the adults know that the magic is in danger but continue to pretend otherwise for absolutely no reason, and because if Bruno told anyone about his vision before disappearing, then his IQ is approximately equal to that of a loaf of bread. Luisa's second purpose in the story is to begin losing her gift after talking with Mirabel in order to give Abuela an additional reason to suspect that Mirabel is the source of the problem with the magic. The problem with this is that Luisa is the only person being affected in this way, for some reason. Thirdly, Luisa is meant to show the harmful psychological consequences of her grandmother's excessive expectations. The problem with this is that we never see Abuela or anyone else laying these expectations on her. The most we get is Abuela reminding everyone to work hard and the villagers yelling their problems at Luisa. We never see anyone so much as imply that she shouldn't take time for herself or have a rest. What we do see is that when she tries not to work so hard, her gift begins to leave her, suggesting that the magic does actually depend on hard work, which means that Abuela was right after all, somehow. Honestly, Luisa's writing is actually worse than I realized the first several times I watched this movie. I think she has a likable personality and is a pretty good person, but the instances in which she directly affects the plot are either illogical or unnecessary. I'm afraid, Luisa, that having a catchy song cannot save you from that. And I very nearly forgot to do a character summary for Casita. Casita is helpful, likes praise, cares about punctuality. Casita is also the canary in the coal mine that there is a problem with the Encanto when the house begins to crumble and fall apart. Casita, for some unexplained reason, has no power within Bruno's bedroom, is concerned for the family's safety even while in its own death throes, and can speak with Mirabel but doesn't tell her anything of consequence. Honestly, I think the idea of having a semi-sentient living house is actually kind of cool, but beyond that, there is no reason for the house to be this way. It's actually worse than that because the fact that the house has all these powers only serves to raise more questions. Such as, why can it not help Mirabel in the situations where she would most require it? And why, if it can hear and speak with the family, does it not communicate anything to them of importance? The film would be far more logically consistent were the house to just be a house. I have come across all kinds of fan theories about what the house represents, including that the house is possessed by the departed spirit of Abuelo Pedro. While this might be an interesting idea, it's not in the film and therefore not relevant to this analysis. Next, we come to Isabella. My oh my, what can I say about Isabella? Well, as it turns out, there's quite a bit we can say about Isabella. She can make plants and flowers appear at will. She is repeatedly described as perfect, although this is never elaborated on. She enjoys taunting her little sister. She likes showing off. She seems excited about her upcoming engagement to Mariano, an attitude which is confirmed several times. She is shocked by the idea that marriage may result in babies. She is prophesied to have the life of her dreams and that her power would grow. She worries that Mirabel will cause a disturbance during her proposal dinner. She is willing to tell egregious lies in order to avoid disapproval or embarrassment. She convinces herself that her selfish behavior is actually for the family. Then it turns out that she doesn't actually want to marry Mariano, and she feels no compelling duty or responsibility regarding marriage in general. She blames Mirabel for messing up things that she didn't want anyway. She claims to be the victim of phantom expectations to be perfect. She still enjoys humiliating her little sister. She believes that she has become a better person by being even less considerate of others than she was before, and she believes that relationships can be healed in an instant without so much as apologizing for years of abusive and cruel behavior.
You are a mean girl!
Right, so Isabella is my pick for the most detestable character in the film. This doesn't necessarily mean her character writing is the worst, but as we'll see, it's still pretty bad. Isabella is consistently described by other characters as perfect angel and golden child, and for the life of me, I cannot understand why they do this. Her magical gift is the ability to create and manipulate plant life. This has nothing to do with being perfect, angelic, or graceful, except perhaps that she chooses to make mostly pink and purple flowers, which I guess is supposed to be hyper feminine or something. This isn't so much a blight on her character as it is a blight on all the characters around her who keep saying that she's perfect. At least that would be the case if Isabella herself didn't also claim that she has been stuck being perfect her entire life, whatever that means. What she actually is and what she shows herself to be is a cruel, spiteful, sadistic, self obsessed, narcissistic, deceitful little cretin who refuses to acknowledge or apologize for her mistakes and who is willing to enter into a marriage under false pretenses in order to spare herself the trouble of being honest. And that is the best interpretation I can come up with for her repeatedly lying to everyone about her desire to marry Mariano. Let me be clear here. Writing a character who is a terrible person is not the same as terrible writing. Writing a character who is a terrible person without realizing that you have written a character who is a terrible person is bad writing. The writers want us to believe that her appalling behavior is not her fault and that once she shrugs off the heavy shackles of society's expectations, she is a completely different person. This is absurd. In the first place, nobody actually expects anything of her. On the contrary, everyone treats her like she sweats perfume. Her impending and apparently unwanted engagement to Mariano is entirely her fault, since she put in great effort to convince everyone that she did want it. None of her actions can be blamed on anyone or anything except herself. She derives pleasure from tormenting her little sister about being giftless, which is the one thing that she knows would hurt Mirabel the most. She delights in showing off and has a conniption whenever she is even mildly inconvenienced. She is extremely pleased with herself and seems to really believe that she is, in fact, perfect. Her reconciliation with Mirabel is utterly laughable, as she does not even acknowledge the cruelty of the way she has treated her sister, presumably for many years. She does not apologize to anyone for her conceit and dishonesty. Not Mirabel, not Abuela, not Mariano, no one. Her character arc, and I use that term extremely loosely, consists of being the personification of rancid butter before deciding that she's going to care even less about the consequences of her actions on the people around her. And this is something that I almost forgot to mention. She was prophesied to have the life of her dreams and that her power would grow. If we are to assume that Bruno's prophecies always come true and that they have come true by the end of the film, that would mean that her growing power means that she can now make things besides pink and purple flowers, which there's no reason why she wouldn't have been able to do this before. But it also means that the life of her dreams was to be able to do whatever she wants without any concern whatsoever for the effects that her actions would have on other people. The fact that this was her dream says everything you need to know about this person. The only thing I can praise about this character is that the actress playing her does a great job. Nothing about Isabella should be taken as a role model for young girls to follow, which I suspect is precisely the opposite of the writer's intent. However, as despicable a person as Isabella is, and I can't believe I'm saying this, she is not the worst character in the movie. That title, I'm afraid, has to go to Bruno. To see why, let's look at his list of character traits. Bruno sees the future. He disappeared one day. He makes apparently inerrant predictions about the future, and he was not shy about sharing bad news. He is quirky, superstitious, and shy. He cares enough about the family to pretend to eat with them, but does not care enough about the family to actually eat with them or to do anything to save the Encanto. He wants to protect Mirabel from suspicion. He is an idiot whose decisions make absolutely no sense. He thinks that nobody likes him, and and is willing to hide in the walls for a decade in order to escape being disliked. He is prone to giving up easily, he is terrified of his own mother, and he is slow to apologize for misunderstandings. Bruno is the worst written character in the film. And it's a shame because I actually like Bruno a lot. He's fun, he's quirky, he actually made me laugh a couple of times, and as I said, his voice actor puts in a great performance. Unfortunately, Bruno is the perfect storm of being absolutely essential to the plot while also making no sense whatsoever. Bruno sees in vision that the fate of the magic will depend on Mirabel for some reason. This is the only vision he has ever had that allows the subject any agency for some reason. His decision to keep this a secret by being a wall hobo while also leaving the vision in his bedroom is astronomically bonkers. Had he made anything even approaching a rational decision, the plot could have taken any number of vastly different directions. His fear of his own mother is never explained. That everyone seems to dislike him for being a creepy weirdo is inconsistent with how he is depicted on screen. The rules of how his gift works change constantly with no explanation. The fact that it took him 20 years to apologize to Peppa for the miscommunication at her wedding is palpably ridiculous. He shows no emotion whatsoever upon meeting Antonio for what is probably the first time. He claims that Mirabel cannot be blamed for destroying the miracle in the house when he knows better than anyone that she was directly responsible for it. He claims to have been the one patching up the cracks in the walls, which is not only an impossibility, but is completely unnecessary as it leads nowhere and only adds to the nonsense. And as I mentioned in the review of Dolores, his prophecy about her, that she would see the man of her dreams betrothed to another, is inexplicably wrong, as Mariano and Isabella are never actually engaged. Maybe betrothal means something else in Colombia, or maybe this line is some kind of genius sequel bait, but I doubt it. None of Bruno's decisions make any sense. His abilities fluctuate to suit the convenience of the writers, and every attempt to build other characters off of him only compounds the errors. Bruno, I'm sorry, but you are just a terribly written character. Next on the chopping block is Alma, also known as Abuela. Abuela is a widow. She's devoted to her family and the magic of the Encanto. She has a strong work ethic and sense of duty. She believes that work and dedication are necessary to keep the miracle burning. She partially blames Mirabel for the failure of her gift ceremony. She does not want whatever happened to Mirabel to spread to others, especially Antonio. She does not seem to have a better understanding of how the magic works than anyone else does. She wants things to be perfect. She speaks kindly and calmly. She attributes the magic of the Encanto to the candle itself. She was willing to allow Mirabel to help Antonio when he asked for her specifically. She knows that the magic is in danger. She prays to the spirit of her late husband, and she deeply misses Pedro. She wants everyone to work twice as hard and not take the miracle for granted. She seems to dislike things being out of place or irregular. She suspects that Mirabel may be contributing to the failure of the magic and is unwilling to admit that there is a problem with the magic. She prioritizes preparing a dinner party over investigating the problem with the magic. She may perhaps believe that Isabella getting married will fix the magic. She asked Bruno to have a vision after Mirabel's gift ceremony failed. She is willing to admit to her family that the Encanto is in danger, but is not willing to admit it to any of the townspeople. She prioritizes keeping up appearances over solving problems and does not understand why telling Peppa to calm down is unhelpful. She believes that Mirabel is causing the problems with the magic. She claims that Bruno never cared about the family, even though she has 40 years of evidence to the contrary. She does not realize that she is overlooking the needs of individual family members, and by the end of the film, she believes that the family and the Encanto are broken because of her, apologizes for letting her grief and fear get in the way of showing love to her family, believes that Mirabel was sent by Pedro as an answer to her prayer, is okay with things being imperfect, and believes that her family is of greater value than the Encanto. Aside from Mirabel, Abuela is the most important character in the story. She is the closest thing that we have to an antagonist, and so it is extremely important that her character writing be of high quality in order for the story to function. Abuela's grief over the loss of her family causes her to be highly invested in the miracle that cost him his life. She seems to have a general sense that the magic comes with a corresponding responsibility to use it for good, which, as an ethical stance, doesn't really need explaining, although many of her other beliefs do. She believes that each new generation must keep the miracle burning and that hard work and dedication are necessary in order to do so, which I think means that she believes the magic will fade or be lost if certain requirements or behaviors are not met by the family. This isn't so much an ethical statement as it is a statement of her understanding of the mechanics of how the magic works. The enormous problem with this is that we as the audience never learn why she believes this. nor is it ever made clear specifically what she believes these behavioral requirements to be. The best we get is a vague sense that Abuela wants things to be perfect in order for the magic to thrive, but this is never explained or developed. Several other characters, most notably Luisa and Isabella, seem to think that they are overburdened by expectations, and although they do not name Abuela explicitly, it is strongly implied that she is the source of these expectations. This is plausible, but the problem is that we never get to see it. We never actually get to see Abuela lay these heavy expectations on anyone, nor do the other characters ever describe specifically what they are being asked to do that is so unfair, which means that either the audience is not being shown interactions that are critical to understanding the relationships between several main characters, or we are meant to believe that Abuela expecting anything of her family is unfair. And I'm not sure which of these is worse, to be honest. We do see one instance of Abuela treating someone unfairly, and that is when she accidentally leaves Mirabel out of the family photo. This is definitely inexcusable, but many of the other choices that she makes in relation to Mirabel are not. She does not know why Mirabel did not receive a gift, and given that nobody understands the magic, it is not impossible that Mirabel somehow did something wrong, or is simply not compatible with the magic for reasons. As far as anyone knows, that could be true. Out of concern for Antonio, she asks Mirabel to stop trying to decorate. This hurts Mirabel, but Abuela is not being unfair. If anything, the magic is being unfair by not having discernible rules. And when it becomes clear that Antonio cannot complete his ceremony without assistance, Abuela allows Mirabel to help him without objection because Antonio specifically requested her. So Abuela's concerns about Mirabel and the magic are not terribly extreme. However, as the movie progresses, Abuela accumulates more and more reasons to believe Mirabel is somehow a threat to the magic and the family. The audience is supposed to believe that Abuela's suspicions are unfounded, but they aren't. Abuela also makes many decisions that are not consistent with her knowledge and established motivations. She believes the magic is in danger, but does nothing about it. She assumes that her son Bruno left of his own volition when she has no reason to believe this. She never searches his room either for him or for any remnant of the vision that she specifically asked him to have. She doesn't discuss the failing magic with other members of the family who she knows already know about it, most notably Mirabel, but also whoever it was that Luisa overheard talking about Bruno's vision, even though, as we've discussed, that's impossible. She chastises Augustine for keeping a secret, thereby ruining Isabella's proposal dinner, when in fact the dinner was ruined because Dolores did not keep the secret. She says that she neglected her family because she was afraid of losing the miracle, but what we are shown is that she neglects both the miracle and her family in order to keep up appearances when she has no established motivation for doing so. In many ways, her character arc is more important to the story than Mirabel's, and unfortunately, it does not work as intended. What I believe the writers intended is for Abuela's actions to seem shockingly unfair and selfish, and to then be recontextualized as the tragic and desperate actions of a deeply traumatized woman. The big payoff is supposed to be the realization that she is just as much a victim as Mirabel. However, what actually happens is that a significant portion of Abuela's choices simply don't make sense even from her own point of view. This makes it difficult to either blame her or empathize with her because it is almost impossible to make a meaningful connection between what we are told her values are and how she actually behaves. She does not act in a way that will accomplish her goals. She acts in a way to maximize the tension and drama of the scenes she is in and to frustrate the protagonist. The conclusion of her character arc is supposed to be realizing that she's been overlooking her family by worrying about the magic, and that given the choice, she would rather have her family than the miracle. But this payoff is hamstrung by the fact that she never really acted like she took the threat to the magic seriously, and that she never has to make a choice between the miracle and her family. Now, I think what the writers are going for here was the stodgy traditionalist and hyper-conservative elder who's always concerned with keeping up appearances, but that doesn't make sense in this context. The reason why we have the stereotype of religiously devout and elderly hyper-traditionalists is that they come from a religious tradition where there is a God who has set commandments, and you will be socially judged for how well you appear to adhere to those commandments. But this film has gone out of its way to obscure the religion of this community. Like, yes, we saw that there is a church and a priest, and yes, we saw Alma and Pedro getting married in a church, but in every situation where a Catholic family and a Catholic community might be expected to openly acknowledge the existence of God, they don't. So the religious fervor and the social pressure of moral obligations that is really the only thing that could explain Abuela's preoccupation with keeping up appearances, have been deliberately stripped from the film. Which means that Abuela's preoccupation with keeping up appearances rather than solving the problem with the magic that she is supposed to be terrified of losing makes absolutely no sense. If you don't believe me, I just ask you, what is she afraid would happen if she admits there's a problem? In a religiously devout and hyper traditional community, the negative consequences that you would fear are A, social ostracization, and B, punishment from God. Because, as I understand it, in Catholicism, receiving miracles from God is actually dependent on living up to a certain moral code, which is something that the film does not want to acknowledge. If the script had just openly allowed the family to be Catholic, this wouldn't be an issue. The omission of any explicit reference to God or religion or commandments or just general moral codes is what's making Abuela's actions make no sense. Her unresolved grief is completely irrelevant here. And if the script had allowed Abuela to be openly afraid of displeasing God, then her pushing Isabella into a marriage in order to please God and thus save the miracle that comes from God would make sense. I cannot know this for sure, of course, but I highly suspect that Abuela was written to be a stodgy, hyper conservative, hyper traditional, and hyper religious old biddy who is stuck in her ways and demands that people conform to very strict codes of behavior, and that by the end of the film, she was supposed to learn to let those silly things go in favor of love. But then the writers got scared of the backlash that they might get by putting such an explicitly anti religious message into their children's movie, so they just scrubbed all explicit references to religion and left it to the audience to mentally fill in the gaps. Whether you would agree with such an anti religious message is not the point. The point is that, as it stands, there is no reason for her to be doing the things that she does, and the supposedly odious expectations that are being laid on the family are absent. Some of Abuela's scenes in isolation are quite powerful, and the actress's performance is top notch. But overall, the way she's written, Abuela is a frustratingly inconsistent character. Which brings us at last to the big cheese herself, Mirabel. There is a lot to say about Mirabel. She's young and inquisitive, and when the film opens, she is on the cusp of receiving her magical gift. She's friendly, she can sing and dance, and did not actually receive a gift after all, and doesn't like talking about it. She resents Isabella for taunting her. She seems to be envious of Isabella's abilities. She loves her parents but doesn't want to confide in them. She wants to contribute to the family as much as she can. She is deeply hurt that her grandmother sees her as a potential problem but tries to hide this fact. She loves Antonio and feels protective of him. She wants Antonio to move on and grow up but will be lonely without him. She still lives in the nursery. She still remembers the pain and disappointment of her own ceremony. She envies the love and attention lavished on Antonio. She feels bitter, disappointed, lonely, and confused because she did not get a gift. She desperately wants and prays/asks for a gift of her own. She insists that what she saw during Antonio's party was real. She is willing to eavesdrop on her grandmother. She knows that her grandmother knows that there is a serious problem with the Encanto. She decides to take responsibility for saving the Encanto. She tries to keep her little mission a secret. She is a compassionate and empathetic listener. She is brave and resourceful. She wants to hide Bruno's vision from her grandmother. She is probably, scratch that, definitely more selfishly motivated than she is willing to admit. She can be impatient. She does not want to make a scene. She wants to save the Encanto in order to make people proud of her. She is willing to stop trying to save the Encanto if she is making the problem worse. She really dislikes Isabella. She is the key to everything. She does not give up easily. She forgives easily, even when people express no remorse and blame their actions on others. She blames the failing Encanto and Bruno's disappearance on her grandmother, even though she has no reason to believe this. She rejects the idea that she herself might be contributing to the problem, even though she acknowledged this possibility only minutes earlier. She blames the failing Encanto on her own selfish desires for recognition and esteem. She seems to understand her grandmother better after hearing a backstory that she was already aware of. She is determined to somehow fix the family. She is looked up to and admired despite having done nothing admirable that anyone knows about. She still doesn't get a gift, but doesn't feel bad about it anymore, and believes that stars don't shine, but instead they burn. On the whole, Mirabel is defined by her love for her family, her yearning for a sense of belonging, and her profound and painful disappointment over not receiving a magical gift. It isn't actually the gift that she seems to want most, however. What she really craves is a feeling of being valued, needed, and having something of her own to offer. We see her consistently looking for ways to be of service and make herself useful, even when there are others who could probably accomplish the task better and with less effort. She craves approval, recognition, and attention, and if at any point her grandmother had simply looked her in the eyes and said, "Thank you, Mirabel, I am so proud of you for working so hard to contribute to the family," the film would basically be over because our heroine's needs would then be met, gift or no gift. I like Mirabel. It is very easy for me to identify with her situation, as it reminds me in a lot of ways of some of the struggles of my own life. Subjectively, I can't help but root for her. Every time I watch this movie, I want her to succeed. I want her to find something special to call her own. I want her to learn, to grow, and be happy. However, let's put all of that aside for the moment and just ask, does Mirabel act in a manner consistent with her knowledge and motivations? Well, it's been about 10 years since she failed to receive a gift. That's quite a bit of time for her to learn, grow, mature, and also to suffer. All things considered, she seems surprisingly well adjusted. She's cheerful, upbeat, and friendly. She's just happy to be a madrigal. She is encouraging toward Antonio, and it almost seems like she's really gotten over her disappointment, that she's not actually thinking about herself at all. Only then we learn that this is a facade. Instead of finding healing, growth, and wisdom over the past 10 years, it seems that she's really just learned how to manage the pain, and it all comes crashing back down during Antonio's party. She sees the cracks in the house, nobody believes her, and then she learns that Abuela does believe her, but is afraid to say so openly. Given what we know about Mirabel, I can absolutely believe that she would become obsessed with the idea of being the one to save the miracle. This is her chance to be someone, to do something on her own that no one else could or was willing to do. She is more excited about having an adventure and being someone important than she is about actually preserving the miracle. How do I know this? Well, because she refuses to discuss her quest with the one person who she knows for certain believes the problem to be real, Abuela. If Mirabel's primary concern was saving the miracle, there is no reason why she should not be trying to work together with her grandmother. It's entirely possible that Abuela would tell her not to get involved, but Mirabel doesn't even try. When she meets Bruno, she tells him that she is willing to back off if she truly is harming the magic. When Bruno confirms that one way or another everything depends on her choice, she resumes her quest. She does not even acknowledge the possibility that, as far as she knows, choosing not to get involved might be the choice that saves the miracle. The reason for both of these choices is simple. If Mirabel isn't the one to fix everything, then her chances of receiving the recognition, praise, and acceptance she desperately craves will be much lower. After the candle finally goes out and the house collapses, Mirabel apologizes to her grandmother, saying that she was just trying to be something she's not. When the extended version of Bruno's vision directs her to embrace Isabella, Mirabel balks for no other reason than that she doesn't like her sister and does not want to endure the humiliation. Mirabel is not selfless. She is trying to accomplish a noble goal, but for mostly selfish reasons. Far from being a problem, this is actually perfectly consistent with what we know about her. She is struggling to feel accepted. She feels left out, neglected, and ignored, and for good reason. She feels as though she has very little, if any, value, and at least one member of her immediate family torments her repeatedly for having no gift, despite this being completely outside of her control. Any teenager in her situation would be thinking night and day of how to get their emotional needs met and would have very little thought to spare for anything else. It would be beyond remarkable if Mirabel was truly as mature and emotionally healthy as she appears to be at the start of the film. For this reason, we need to examine her decisions with the understanding that saving the miracle is not her primary motivation. Finding acceptance, self worth, and praise is her primary motivation, and she believes that being or doing something special is simply a means to achieve this. So, to start with, let's look at her behavior during Antonio's ceremony. Mirabel's special relationship with Antonio is probably the strongest and most believable in the movie. They have lived in the same room, presumably for several years. She is something of a second mother to him, and this partially fills some of that longing she feels. She may not be magical herself, but Antonio thinks that she's special. She knows that their special relationship will never be the same after he gets his own room and leaves her behind, but she pushes him to move on anyway. Because the writers took the time to establish their bond, it is 100% believable that her love for Antonio overcame her selfish desire to keep him around to satisfy her own emotional needs. Her decision to crash his party by bellowing about the cracks is less believable, but it's not impossible given her fragile emotional state at the time. Her decision not to talk openly with Abuela about saving the miracle is, as I've laid out, explicable by her selfish desire to fix it herself. Trying, not very hard, to keep Dolores from spilling her secret during the proposal dinner also makes sense if she is trying to keep Abuela ignorant of what she's been doing so as to be able to take credit for it herself. Her decision to accuse her grandmother of hurting the magic makes sense, not because Mirabel has logical reasoning or evidence on her side, but because Mirabel wants it to be her grandmother's fault. Not only does Mirabel desperately want to be the solution rather than the problem, but what better way to earn Abuela's respect than by fixing a problem that Abuela herself has caused? But when the miracle finally comes crashing down, Mirabel finally has to admit that she made a mistake. She was not on a selfless quest to save the family, but a selfish quest to meet her own emotional needs. So, with that in mind, what does Mirabel learn as a result of her journey? How has she changed? What wisdom has she acquired? What skills or attributes has she developed? And in what ways is she a different or better person now than she was at the beginning of the movie? Honestly, I'm struggling to come up with anything. If she's learned anything at all, it's really just that she doesn't need to have a gift in order to be valuable. But she already believed this. We know that she believed it because from the beginning of the movie, she's trying to demonstrate that she is valuable while also not having a gift. The only thing that's really changed is that the rest of the family now sees her as valuable even though she has no gift. Mirabel's character arc is for everyone else around her to realize that she's wonderful just the way she is, and this despite the fact that, as far as anyone knows, she may have been responsible for destroying the miracle, their home, and nearly getting everyone killed in the process. Mirabel herself hasn't changed at all. There's no decision she makes near the end of the film that makes the audience go, ah, the old Mirabel would never have done that. Look at how much she's grown and changed. In fact, Mirabel hasn't really had to make any hard choices at all. There are so many interesting ways she could have grown from where she started, but nothing really happens. She could have been given an opportunity to choose between her family's well being and her own desires to feel important, which would have forced her to examine her priorities. She could have been put in a situation where she might have the ability to save the miracle, but no one will ever know that she did it, which would give her a chance to sacrifice the acceptance and recognition that she craves in order to benefit those she loves. Or she could have discovered that she truly was harming the magic and that letting go of her quest, backing off, and resigning herself to her situation was the only way to save it. What a sacrifice that would have been. Or she could have been offered a magical gift of her own, but maybe with a sort of monkey's paw effect that harmed the gift of others, giving her another difficult choice to make. Or she may have found a meaningful way to contribute to the family without a magical gift at all. The film kind of hints at this last option by having her act as a listening ear to multiple family members who are struggling in silence with their own problems, almost like she's the family therapist or something, but we don't see her actually learn anything from this experience. And with Luisa, at least, it's arguable that Mirabel's influence just made everything worse. Mirabel's arc could have been defined by any or none of these options, but any one of them would have given her a chance to at least grow somehow. As it stands, she's exactly the same person at the end of the film that she's always been. This, for me, is the single most disappointing part of this entire film. I want to root for Mirabel's character, but her journey doesn't resonate with me because she doesn't have one. I can't incorporate the lessons that she's learned into my own life because she doesn't learn anything. I can't respect her for making wise but difficult choices because she doesn't. Everything just kind of works out for her. She spends the entire film acting out understandable but selfish desires, and she's rewarded for it. Mirabel is such a wasted opportunity. She is a strong and compelling character who has some powerful, isolated moments, but ultimately, her journey goes nowhere. So there we are. That's my analysis of Encanto's characters. They're something of a mixed bag with a handful of powerful character moments that are unfortunately strung together primarily by nonsense and blind luck. Combined with a plot that is not very good, I have no choice but to conclude that in terms of its writing, Encanto, objectively, is not very good. At the risk of sounding like a broken record, this does not mean that you are not allowed to enjoy the film. I have enjoyed the film several times by now, and it's honestly given me a lot to think about. But by any metric that does not include personal experiences and or feelings, Encanto is mediocre at best. Well, that concludes my critique of Disney's Encanto. If you have made it this far, I cannot thank you enough for sticking it out. This video took me an extremely long time to make, and knowing that people find my work useful or even just entertaining is highly motivating to me, and frankly, it's the reason I started doing this. So, please leave a comment and tell me your thoughts on this movie and or my analysis of it. This is my first serious attempt at media criticism and my first YouTube video, so I am certain it is not perfect. If you disagree with my evaluation, please let me know where you think I've gone wrong, as it can only serve to improve my work. I am always concerned with objective quality, and that includes myself, so if you take issue with anything I've presented here, let it rip in the comments. I'm not sure exactly how I'll address any objections that are raised, whether by replying to your comments directly or perhaps releasing an addendum video or something, but what I won't do is hide behind the shield of, this is just my opinion, leave me alone. I have presented my criticism as an objective analysis, and it should be treated as such. If you can convince me that I'm wrong one way or another, I will acknowledge as much. Anyway, thanks so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video.